place, black boy!
The mop hit the floor. Dirty water exploded across worn work boots. Darius Webb stumbled backward, 43 years old, but moving with control most men half his age couldn't manage. Brandon the Reaper Castellano stood over him, arms crossed. His 2.3 million Instagram followers would never see this version of their hero. "Clean it again," Brandon said, loud enough for the empty gym to amplify his voice. "Maybe if you spent less time breathing our air, these floors would actually stay clean." Elite Performance MMA, downtown Las Vegas, 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday in March 2024. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The gym sat quiet except for Brandon's voice and the sound of water dripping from Darius's uniform. Brandon kicked the mop bucket. More water cascaded across the floor, soaking through Darius's pants. "There, now you've got something real to clean up." Darius bent down slowly. His hands, scarred, weathered, steady, gripped the mop handle. Those hands had once held championship gold in front of 18,000 screaming fans at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. But Brandon Castellano had no idea who he was really dealing with. 5 years ago, Darius Webb's face covered billboards across the Las Vegas Strip. The Detroit Destroyer. That's what Joe Rogan called him during his championship reign from 2016 to 2018. 2 successful title defenses in the welterweight division, 17 knockouts, a record that made analysts compare him to legends. Then, everything collapsed. January 2019. His ex-girlfriend, Vanessa Pritchard, fabricated assault allegations that spread across TMZ, ESPN, every MMA forum on the internet. By the time security footage proved Darius was in a completely different state during the alleged incident, 6 months later, the damage couldn't be undone. Sponsors vanished. His $850,000 UFC contract dissolved. The luxury condo in Henderson went into foreclosure. Friends stopped returning calls. The court of public opinion convicted him, and evidence couldn't resurrect a reputation the media buried alive. Only one person stood by him, his 71-year-old grandmother, Ruth Webb. She raised him in Detroit's Cass Corridor after his mother overdosed when he was 7. Now, Ruth battled stage 3 colon cancer in a cramped North Las Vegas apartment, medical bills drowning them both. The janitor job at Elite Performance paid $13.50 an hour. Barely enough for Ruth's medications and electricity. But Darius showed up every night at 10 p.m. Invisible to fighters who trained in the facility, he kept spotless. Brandon Castellano built his brand on being unfiltered and keeping it real. His YouTube channel, training footage and podcast trashing other fighters, had 890,000 subscribers who devoured his aggressive persona. At 29, he'd fought in 3 UFC preliminary cards, lost 2 by decision, won 1 by split decision most analysts called robbery. But Brandon understood something crucial. Controversy sold better than championships. His Instagram featured leased luxury cars, champagne bottles he couldn't afford, and humor that crossed lines his audience defended as just jokes. Brandon started coaching at Elite Performance in November 2023. The harassment began immediately. "Yo, make sure you get that corner real good," he'd announced during training sessions, pointing at Darius while students watched. "Some people are naturally good at staying in corners, if you know what I mean." Students laughed nervously, uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge their instructor. Darius would nod silently, push his card away, continue working, but he couldn't stop watching the training sessions. Old habits refused to die. He'd observe from the periphery, noting Brandon's sloppy footwork, his chin perpetually exposed, defensive positioning that would get him hurt against real competition. One February evening, Brandon demonstrated a rear-naked choke defense to his advanced class. His technique was fundamentally wrong. Hands positioned too wide, chin elevated instead of tucked. A highway to unconsciousness. "See how I keep my posture strong?" Brandon explained to 6 students, each paying $200 per session for incorrect instruction. Darius wiped down mirrors 15 feet away, watching the demonstration in the reflection. His head shook almost imperceptibly. Unconscious response from years of teaching proper technique. Brandon caught the movement. "Something funny, janitor?" The gym fell silent. Darius froze. "No, sir. Sorry." "No, please." Brandon's voice dripped theatrical sarcasm. "The help wants to teach technique now." Darius returned to cleaning. Brandon wasn't finished. He crossed the mat, invading Darius's space with confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "I asked you a question, boy." The word hung in the air. "Have you ever been forced to watch someone harm others while you stayed silent? Drop a comment, what would you do?" Several students shifted uncomfortably. Near the equipment rack, Candace Morrison, 26-year-old yoga instructor who cleaned the women's locker room, stood with her phone concealed in her hand. Recording. Darius met Brandon's eyes with calm that unsettled the younger man. "Your chin's too high. In a real fight, that defense gets you choked out in seconds." Brandon's face flushed crimson. His carefully cultivated authority was being challenged by a janitor in front of paying customers who expected him to be the unquestioned expert. "Wrong!" Brandon laughed without humor. 23 professional fights, and you think you know better than me?" "I know that technique will get these people hurt," Darius said quietly. The confrontation became Brandon's obsession. Over the next 3 weeks, harassment escalated into psychological warfare designed to break Darius or force him to quit. Week 1 brought systematic humiliation. He scheduled emergency cleanings during peak training hours, forcing Darius to mop around active sparring sessions. Students would sweat and bleed on floors Darius just cleaned, and Brandon would stand over him, arms crossed, ensuring maximum degradation. "Careful around the equipment, boy," Brandon would announce loudly. "We can't have you breaking anything expensive." The word boy became Brandon's favorite weapon, delivered with just enough emphasis to make everyone uncomfortable, but not quite enough to trigger official complaints. Candace Martinez watched from the front desk, taking notes she hoped she'd never need to use. Darius endured it with patience of a man who'd survived worse. Ruth needed her medication. Rent was due in 10 days. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford, but Brandon wasn't satisfied with quiet suffering. He needed total dominance. Every morning, Brandon arrived early to inspect Darius's overnight cleaning. Finding fault with spotless surfaces became ritual. "This mirror has streaks," he'd announce, pointing at invisible flaws. "Do it again." Darius would re-clean the same surface 3 times, while Brandon watched with satisfaction. Week 2 brought psychological warfare that cut deeper. Brandon had found old newspaper articles and began sharing them with his inner circle, spinning a narrative of a washed-up has-been who'd never amounted to anything. "Did you know our janitor used to think he was a fighter?" Brandon announced during a group session, loud enough for Darius to hear. "Golden gloves, apparently. Look how that turned out." Tyler Harrison, a 21-year-old college wrestler whose father paid extra for private sessions, shifted uncomfortably. He'd been watching Darius's movements since the heavy bag incident, recognizing something his instructor clearly didn't understand: the way Darius unconsciously shifted his weight when watching technique demonstrations, how his hands formed perfect guard positions while wiping down equipment. Brandon's social media posts became increasingly pointed. Photos of the gym's professional training environment always featured Darius in the background, usually bent over cleaning something, captions about knowing your place and staying humble. His followers devoured it, sharing memes about ambitious janitors and dreams versus reality. From Brandon's perspective, this wasn't cruelty. It was necessary dominance. His entire identity revolved around being the alpha male of elite performance. Every student who walked through those doors needed to see him as unquestioned authority. A janitor who could throw better combinations than he could was an existential threat that had to be eliminated. The harassment escalated daily. Brandon would accidentally kick equipment into Darius's path, forcing him to clean around obstacles. He'd time his loudest training sessions for exactly when Darius needed to clean nearby areas, ensuring maximum disruption. He'd invite students to tell jokes about ambitious janitors while Darius worked within earshot. Their nervous laughter cut like knives. Week 3 brought the breaking point Brandon had been building toward. "Marcus, hold pads for demonstration," Brandon commanded during a busy evening session. It wasn't a request. Darius looked up from organizing equipment. "I'm not trained for that, sir." "You seemed pretty confident about technique last week. Hold the pads." 20 students formed a circle as Darius reluctantly picked up the focus mitts. Brandon began with light combinations, showing off for his audience. Gradually, his strikes grew harder, testing Darius's tolerance for pain and humiliation. "See how I'm targeting specific angles?" Brandon explained to his students while throwing increasingly vicious shots at Darius's padded hands. "A real fighter adapts power to the situation." Darius absorbed each impact without complaint, military training keeping his face neutral even as his hands began to ache. But Brandon wasn't done. He began throwing combinations that intentionally missed the pads, glancing off Darius's forearms and shoulders. "Oops," Derek would say with fake concern. "Better reflexes next time." The accidental shot to Darius's injured left shoulder, an old military injury Brandon had somehow learned about, sent lightning bolts of pain down his arm. Darius dropped the pads. His right hand formed a fist before he forced it open, catching himself before crossing a line he couldn't cross. "That's right. Walk away like you always do," Brandon called after him as Darius stepped back, massaging his shoulder. "At least you know your place." But Brandon's masterpiece came that weekend. Gym security footage showing Darius's heavy bag demonstration appeared on Brandon's Instagram with the caption, "When the help thinks they can fight, don't know your place, yak humility, iron forge." The video exploded. Within hours, thousands of views, hundreds of comments, most ugly, racist, exactly what Brandon hoped for. "Stick to mopping," read one comment with 50 likes. "Janitor thinks he's Rocky," laughed another. Coach Rivera, the gym's older Hispanic trainer, found Darius in the supply closet Monday night, sitting among cleaning chemicals with his head in his hands. "I saw the video," Rivera said quietly. Darius didn't look up. "I need this job." "That man is going to destroy you if you don't fight back." "I can't fight back. He's planning to fire you anyway," Rivera interrupted. "I heard him talking to management. He's looking for a replacement." Darius finally raised his eyes. For the first time since this began, Rivera saw something other than resignation there. Something dangerous was waking up. The trap would be sprung in 3 days. Comment below. Would you have stayed silent this long? Your answer matters. Candace Morrison has always watched everything. Her phone's hidden camera captured conversations that would later prove crucial. She reported Brandon's behavior to gym management twice. Both times, she was told Brandon brings in significant revenue, and they needed to handle things internally. The psychological warfare continued. Brandon arrived early each morning to inspect Darius's overnight cleaning, finding fault with spotless surfaces. "This mirror has streaks," he'd announce, pointing at invisible flaws. "Do it again." Darius would re-clean the same surface 3 times, while Brandon watched with satisfaction. Other trainers began avoiding the confrontations, unwilling to witness systematic destruction of a man's dignity. But something was building beneath Darius's calm exterior. Something Brandon's arrogance prevented him from recognizing. March 28th arrived, 11:30 p.m. Brandon walked into elite performance with 4 other coaches, Marcus Toledano, Vincent Howe, Garrett Yates, and his cameraman, who just happened to be filming content for his YouTube channel. They found Darius in the main training area finishing his nightly routine. "Hey, Janitor," Brandon's voice echoed across the empty gym. "I've been thinking about what you said, about my technique being wrong." Darius continued mopping, sensing danger. "So here's your chance to prove it. Spar with me. Show everyone that a black janitor knows better than I do." "I'm working, Mr. Castellano. I'm not insured for that." "Of course you're not." Brandon's laugh was cruel. "Because you're full of nonsense. All talk, just like I thought." The other coaches joined in, phones out, recording from multiple angles. This was content gold, humiliating the janitor, who dared challenge Brandon's authority. "Unless you're scared," Brandon pressed. "Is that it? Big talk when you're hiding behind a mop, but when it's time to actually perform?" "Light sparring only," Darius interrupted quietly. "No head strikes." Brandon's grin widened, like a predator sensing weakness. "Whatever you say, champ." They cleared the center mat. Darius removed his work shirt, revealing a lean, scarred physique that should have warned Brandon he was making a catastrophic mistake. But arrogance is a powerful anesthetic to common sense, and what happens next will send shockwaves through this entire gym. Brandon abandoned any pretense of light sparring immediately. His right hand came in fast and reckless, the kind of looping punch that works on amateurs in controlled environments, the kind that gets professionals knocked out cold. What happened next took 1.3 seconds. Darius slipped the punch with minimal movement, a fraction of an inch that made Brandon's fist sail past his ear harmlessly. In the same fluid motion, his left hand came up in a perfect check hook. The punch caught Brandon on the point of his jaw with surgical precision. Time seemed to freeze. Brandon Castellano's eyes rolled back before his body understood what happened. His legs gave out. He crumpled to the mat like a demolished building, consciousness gone before he hit the canvas. The sound of his skull bouncing off the floor echoed through the silent gym like a judge's gavel, delivering final verdict. The cameras kept rolling. The four coaches stood frozen, mouths open in shock. Their phones captured everything from multiple angles: the perfect slip, the devastating hook, Brandon's body going limp, the collapse. Darius immediately dropped to one knee beside Brandon, checking his pulse and breathing with practiced efficiency of someone who'd knocked out 17 professional fighters during his career. His hands moved with medical precision, checking for neck injury, monitoring breathing pattern, assessing pupil response. Brandon's eyes fluttered open after 8 seconds. His consciousness returned slowly. The first thing he saw was the janitor he'd spent months tormenting, looking down at him with genuine concern. "You okay?" Darius asked quietly. Brandon couldn't respond. His jaw throbbed, his vision blurred. But more than physical pain, something else had been shattered: his entire identity. 3 months of dominance and superiority had just been obliterated by one punch from a man he'd called boy. The coaches stood in stunned silence, their cameras still recording. None of them moved to help Brandon up. They were processing what they'd just witnessed. That wasn't a lucky punch. That was decades of championship-level training compressed into 1.3 seconds of perfect technique. Marcus Toledano was the first to speak. "Holy hell. Did you see how he slipped that punch?" Vincent Hauf replayed the footage on his phone. "That's professional-level defense, like world-class professional." Garrett Yates looked at Darius with new eyes. "Who the hell is this guy?" Brandon struggled to his feet, refusing Darius's offered hand. His face burned with humiliation deeper than any physical pain. He'd just been embarrassed in front of his coaches, on camera, for content that was supposed to showcase his dominance. "Don't ever disrespect me in my gym again," Brandon whispered, voice shaking with rage, "or you'll be looking for a new job tomorrow." But they both knew the damage was done. The coaches had seen something that would haunt Brandon's nightmares, proof that the janitor knew more about fighting than their expensive instructor. Darius picked up his work shirt and walked back to his cleaning cart without another word. By 6:47 a.m., the video had 1.8 million views across 4 platforms. By noon, it was trending number 3 on Twitter under Dr. Janitor KO. By evening, every major MMA news outlet was running stories about UFC influencer brutally knocked out by gym janitor. Darius woke up in his grandmother's apartment to 17 missed calls. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications flooded in faster than he could read them. Ruth sat in her recliner, watching CNN where they were showing the knockout on loop. Analysts debated who the mysterious janitor was. "Baby, that's you," Ruth said, voice weak from chemotherapy but eyes bright with recognition. "That's my Darius." The video had been uploaded from 6 different angles. Marcus's phone, Vincent's phone, Garrett's phone, Brandon's cameraman's professional camera, 2 students who'd been filming from the doorway. Every angle showed the same thing: perfect defensive technique, devastating counterpunch, immediate collapse. Sports analysts were already breaking down the footage. "Look at that slip," one commentator said on ESPN. "That's not something you learn from YouTube. That's years of high-level training." "The way he checked the pulse immediately," another added. "That's someone who's been in professional fights. He knew exactly what to do." Brandon's phone was blowing up too, but for different reasons. His comment section had turned against him. The video showed him rushing forward aggressively after agreeing to light sparring. It showed him throwing a full-power punch at someone in work clothes. It showed him getting knocked out cold by one perfect counter. Bro got humbled by the janitor. Maybe learn some defense before talking trash. That slip was clean. Who is this janitor? Brandon really thought he could fight? Within hours, internet detectives started digging. Old forum posts about the Detroit Destroyer, archived UFC highlights from 2016-2018, newspaper articles about false allegations, and a champion who disappeared. By evening, the truth was spreading across social media like wildfire. Wait, that's Darius Webb, former UFC champion. Brandon has been bullying a 2-time champion for months? This is the greatest karma video I've ever seen. Malcolm Graves, the gym's owner, was landing at McCarran International Airport when his phone exploded with notifications. He'd been in Japan for 2 months visiting training facilities. Now his gym was at the center of a viral firestorm. His business partner was frantically calling. "Malcolm, we have a situation. That video of Brandon and the janitor, it's everywhere. Brandon wants the janitor arrested for assault. He's threatening lawsuits. The media is calling non-stop." Malcolm opened Twitter. The video was the top trending topic in sports. He watched it once, then again, then he paused it, zooming in on the janitor's face. Something about those eyes looked familiar. He opened his Uber app, heading straight to his office. He had files to check, a suspicion that, if correct, would change everything. Brandon Castellanos sat in his apartment, watching his world collapse in real time. His Instagram was hemorrhaging followers. His YouTube comment section was brutal. Sponsors were sending concerned emails, but he wasn't defeated yet. His lawyer was already drafting assault charges. His narrative was simple. Unstable employee attacked supervisor during what was supposed to be light training exercise. Unprovoked violence, criminal behavior. Brandon had no idea he was about to face something far worse than a viral video. He was about to face Malcolm Graves' memory. Drop justice in the comments if you're still watching. Malcolm Graves walked into his office at Elite Performance at 2:17 a.m. The 68-year-old UFC Hall of Famer hadn't slept on the flight from Tokyo. His mind kept replaying that knockout video. Something about the janitor's movement patterns felt familiar, the way he checked the pulse, the professional calm after delivering a devastating blow. That wasn't amateur behavior. Malcolm had been around fighters for 45 years. He recognized championship-level instinct when he saw it. He went straight to his file cabinet. Old photos from his days presenting belts to champions, fight posters from the glory years, newspaper clippings he'd kept as memories of the sport's evolution. His hand stopped on a photo from 2017. The image showed him in the octagon at MGM Grand, presenting the welterweight championship belt to a younger fighter. Sweat-covered, victorious, smiling with the kind of joy that only comes from achieving what everyone said was impossible. Malcolm held the photo next to his phone. The knockout video paused on the janitor's face. The same eyes, the same jawline, 7 years older and carrying the weight of a hard life, but unmistakable. "Holy hell," Malcolm whispered. The Detroit Destroyer, Darius Webb, 2-time UFC welterweight champion, 17 knockouts. One of the most technical strikers Malcolm had seen in 30 years around the sport. A fighter who disappeared after false allegations destroyed his career. Malcolm had followed the story back in 2019. The assault charges, the media frenzy, the security footage that eventually proved Darius's innocence. He remembered feeling sick watching a good man's reputation get shredded by lies, but he never knew what happened to Darius after the exoneration. The fighter had vanished from the sport completely. Now Malcolm understood why. When your reputation is destroyed, even the truth can't rebuild what the media tore down. Sponsors don't come back. Opportunities don't return. You take whatever work you can find to survive. Malcolm sat down heavily in his chair. His janitor, the man Brandon had been tormenting for months, was a legitimate UFC legend. His phone buzzed. Text from his business partner. "Brandon's lawyer is here at 9 a.m. demanding meeting. Says janitor committed assault. Wants him arrested and fired." Malcolm typed back, "I'll handle it. Make sure Brandon is there too." Morning came fast. Brandon arrived at 8:45 a.m. with Richard Kellerman, an expensive attorney who specialized in turning losses into lawsuits. They found Malcolm sitting calmly behind his desk. Old fight posters covered the walls behind him. Legends Malcolm had trained with, fought alongside, presented belts to over decades in the sport. "Malcolm, we need immediate action," Kellerman began, opening his briefcase. "My client was assaulted by an employee during what should have been a safe training environment. We're filing criminal charges and a civil suit for medical expenses, emotional distress, and lost income. Brandon has a concussion," Kellerman continued. "Potential jaw fracture. His ability to compete professionally may be compromised. We're looking at damages exceeding $200,000. Malcolm let them talk. When they finished, he leaned forward. "Brandon, do you know who you've been harassing for 3 months? Brandon's confident expression faltered slightly. "Some janitor who—" "Darius Webb." Malcolm's voice cut through the room like a blade. "2-time UFC welterweight champion. 17 knockouts. One of the most technical strikers I've ever seen in 30 years around this sport." The color drained from Brandon's face. Malcolm pulled up the video on his computer. He played it with the volume up this time. Light sparring only, no head strikes. Darius's voice was clear, calm, professional. "Whatever you say, champ." Brandon's mocking response dripped with sarcasm. Then the footage showed Brandon rushing forward aggressively, throwing a full-power looping punch at someone in work clothes who'd just agreed to light sparring. "You bullied a champion into a trap," Malcolm said. "You rushed him with a real strike after agreeing to light sparring. He defended himself with the restraint of someone who's knocked out 17 professional fighters and knows exactly how much damage he can do." Malcolm opened another folder. Candace's recordings. For the next 10 minutes, Brandon's voice filled the office. Racial slurs, deliberate harassment, conversations where Brandon explicitly planned to humiliate the janitor on camera and break him down until he quits or does something stupid. Kellerman's confident expression crumbled with each recording. "These recordings were made without consent," he started. "Nevada is a one-party consent state," Malcolm interrupted. "Candace Morrison documented everything legally, and before you threaten lawsuits, understand this. I will release every second of footage showing exactly who Brandon Castellano really is." Malcolm stood up, his voice hardening. "You have a choice. Walk away quietly, or I make sure every gym, every sponsor, every potential student sees the real Brandon, the one who torments employees with racial slurs, the one who orchestrates humiliation campaigns, the one who rushes a janitor with a full-power punch after agreeing to light sparring." Brandon found his voice, rage replacing shock. "You're choosing a janitor over me? Over everything I bring to this gym?" "I'm choosing a champion over a bully," Malcolm replied. "There's a difference. You're done here, effective immediately." Brandon stood, face twisted with humiliation and fury. "This isn't over. You'll regret this. Get out of my gym." Brandon left, but his rage just found a darker outlet, and his next move almost claimed everyone's life. After the ordeal, Brandon's world collapsed in 48 hours. His Instagram lost 170,000 followers by Monday morning. Sponsors sent termination emails. His YouTube channel was hemorrhaging subscribers by the thousands. Every comment section became a public execution. Imagine getting knocked out by your own janitor. Bro was talking all that trash and got slept in 1.3 seconds. This is what happens when fake fighters meet real champions. The UFC issued a statement Tuesday afternoon. The UFC distances itself from Brandon Castellano's views and behavior. His conduct does not reflect our organization's values of respect, discipline, and sportsmanship. Wednesday brought financial devastation. The luxury cars he'd leased for Instagram photos? Repossession notices arrived. The champagne bottles he'd posed with? Credit card companies were calling about $47,000 in debt. The upscale apartment in Henderson? Eviction proceedings started. His gym revenue had been his lifeline. Private sessions at $200 each. Group classes, online coaching subscriptions, all of it gone within 72 hours. Students requested refunds, citing false expertise and dangerous incorrect techniques. Some threatened lawsuits after Darius's proper instruction revealed how wrong Brandon's teaching had been. Thursday, Brandon sat in his apartment watching Darius on the local news. Malcolm stood beside him explaining Elite Performance's new direction under championship-level coaching. "We're committed to authentic martial arts instruction," Malcolm told the reporter. "Darius Webb brings integrity and expertise that will elevate every student who trains here." The reporter asked about the viral video. Malcolm's response was measured but clear. "Sometimes people mistake confidence for competence. Real champions don't need to tear others down. They lift people up." Brandon threw his phone across the room. His social media was destroyed. His income was gone. His reputation was ashes. But the humiliation burned deeper than any financial loss. Friday night, Brandon made a call he'd been considering for 2 days. "Yeah, I need some work done," he said into the phone. "Professional work. Discreet." The voice on the other end belonged to a security consultant Brandon had met through Vegas nightclub connections, the kind of person who knew people who handled problems. "What kind of work?" "There's a guy. Thinks he's untouchable now. I need him taught a permanent lesson." "That's going to cost you." "I don't care what it costs. I want him hurt. Bad enough that he can't coach. Bad enough that he remembers who he disrespected. $5,000 up front. $5,000 after completion." Brandon checked his bank account. The credit cards were maxed, but he had $8,000 left from his final gym paycheck. Deal. Send me the contact information. Two names came through his phone that night. Javon Brooks and Terrence T-Mac McCoy, muscle for hire operating in North Las Vegas's rougher neighborhoods. Brandon sent them Darius's photo, the gym's address, the schedule showing when Darius left work each night. Instructions were simple. Parking garage, no cameras, hurt him bad enough to end his coaching career. He transferred the first $5,000 Saturday morning. The attack was scheduled for April 18th, Wednesday night, 9:47 p.m. The next turn was what nobody saw coming. April 18th, 9:47 p.m. The parking garage adjacent to Elite Performance sat mostly empty. Concrete pillars cast long shadows under flickering fluorescent lights. Two men waited in the darkness between a pickup truck and a sedan. Javon Brooks gripped a baseball bat. 28 years old, 6'2", built like someone who'd spent time in prison and learned to survive through violence. His partner, Terrence T-Mac McCoy, held a tire iron loosely at his side. Both men wore dark hoodies despite the warm Vegas night. "Just remember," Javon said quietly, "dude's supposed to be some washed-up fighter. Might put up resistance." "Don't matter," T-Mac replied. 2-on-1. "We do this quick and clean." They heard footsteps echoing through the garage. Someone whistling softly, getting closer. Javon tightened his grip on the bat. They stepped out from between the vehicles as the target came into view. Then Javon froze mid-step. The bat lowered slightly as he squinted through the dim lighting. The target was maybe 40 feet away now, walking with easy confidence, gym bag over his shoulder. Wait, that's Coach D?" T-Mac looked at his partner like he'd lost his mind. "What? Nah, man. Nah." Javon's voice rose with disbelief and horror. "That's Coach D. That's Darius Webb." The name hit T-Mac like electricity. He looked at the approaching figure again, recognition dawning across his face. Holy, it can't be, but it was. Darius looked up, sensing something in the air. His eyes found the two men standing in the shadows with weapons. His body shifted automatically into defensive positioning, years of training activating before conscious thought. Then his eyes adjusted to the lighting. His stance relaxed slightly as recognition crossed his face. "Javon? Terrence?" The weapons dropped to their sides. "Coach D!" Javon's voice cracked with emotion. He rushed forward, not to attack, but to embrace. "Man, we thought you were dead or something. You just disappeared." Darius stood still for a moment, processing. Then he returned the embrace, his mind racing back 16 years, 2008 to 2012. Before the UFC championships, before the fame and the fall, back when he was just a fighter trying to give back to his community. Detroit's East Side Community Center, a rundown building in the Cass Corridor with a basement gym that smelled like sweat and old leather. Darius had volunteered there 3 nights a week, teaching free boxing classes to kids who needed somewhere safe to go after school. Javon had been 13 when he first walked through those doors, angry at the world. His father in prison, his mother working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. He'd come looking for a fight. Darius taught him discipline instead. Terrence arrived 6 months later, 12 years old with a black eye and bruises that didn't come from sparring. Foster care system had chewed him up. Darius gave him structure, respect, something to believe in beyond survival. For 4 years, Darius taught them more than boxing. He taught them honor. Taught them that real strength meant protecting people weaker than yourself. Taught them that violence was always the last option, never the first. Then Darius got his UFC contract and moved to Vegas. The community center closed down a year later due to funding cuts, and the kids scattered. "What are you doing here?" Darius asked, though the baseball bat in Javin's hand and the tire iron T-Mac still held were already answering the question. The truth spilled out in a rush of guilt and horror. "Coach, we didn't know it was you." Javin's words tumbled over each other. "This dude Brandon, he hired us, showed us a photo, said you were some janitor who assaulted him, said you were dangerous, that you'd put his career in the hospital." T-Mac pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "He paid us $5,000 up front, promised another $5 after we... He couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of what they'd almost done was crushing. Darius took the phone. Text messages from Brandon filled the screen. Explicit instructions about timing, location, how much damage to inflict. Payment receipts showing wire transfers, recorded phone calls where Brandon outlined exactly what he wanted done. That racist piece of trash lied to us. T-Mac's voice shook with rage. Said you attacked him, said you were out of control, said you needed to be stopped before you hurt someone else. Javon looked at Darius with tears in his eyes. Coach, you saved my life when I was 13. You kept me from becoming what I almost just became tonight, and I nearly... You didn't, Darius said quietly. You recognized me. That's what matters. We got everything documented, Terrence said, opening his phone's recording app. Every conversation with Brandon, every text, every payment. He tried to hire us to commit felony assault, Coach. He needs to pay for this. Darius looked at his former students. Boys he'd trained 16 years ago, now men who'd been weaponized against him by someone too cowardly to face consequences directly. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd taught them discipline and restraint all those years ago. Now that same discipline had just saved his life. By midnight, 2 officers were typing up statements while a detective reviewed the text messages, payment records, and recorded calls on Terrence's phone. By 6 a.m., a warrant was issued for Brandon Castellanos' arrest. The charges: conspiracy to commit assault with a deadly weapon, solicitation of violence, and criminal conspiracy. At 6:47 a.m., police knocked on Brandon's apartment door. He answered in his boxers, eyes still heavy with sleep. The handcuffs clicked onto his wrists before he fully understood what was happening. Brandon Castellano, you're under arrest. The story exploded across every news network by noon. The narrative shifted completely. No longer influencer knocked out by Janitor. Now it was disgraced coach attempts to hire hitmen to attack UFC champion. Brandon's mugshot became a new kind of viral content. A meme representing the consequences of unchecked arrogance, racism, and the kind of rage that leads to felony charges. Comment karma if you believe in justice, because karma came in fast for Brandon. June 14th, 2024. Clark County District Court, Las Vegas. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all charges. Mr. Castellano, you used your position of authority to systematically abuse an employee. When that employee defended himself, you attempted to hire violence against him. You showed no remorse, only rage at being exposed. 10 years in Nevada State Prison. No parole eligibility for 7 years. Brandon's face remained blank as guards led him away in handcuffs. His influencer dreams, his coaching career, his freedom, all reduced to ashes by his own arrogance. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Darius. How does it feel to get justice? One asked. Darius thought about Ruth, healthy now thanks to his UFC insurance, about Javon and Terrence, working with his nonprofit instead of working for criminals, about the students at Elite Performance learning real technique from real champions. Justice isn't about revenge, Darius said. It's about making sure the next person doesn't have to endure what you endured. That's what matters. The clip went viral, not the knockout this time, but wisdom earned through years of enduring injustice with dignity. Brandon Castellano began his sentence at High Desert State Prison 3 days later, inmate number 4729581. 10 years stretched ahead of him to reflect on how pride destroyed everything. But Darius and Brandon's story was far from over. The mix of fury and rage against Darius was just starting. Elite Performance MMA transformed under Darius Webb's leadership like a fighter who'd finally learned proper technique. Gone were the days of incorrect instruction and toxic masculinity disguised as coaching. Darius brought something the gym had never experienced: championship-level expertise combined with genuine care for every student's growth. His first act as technical director was retraining every coach on staff. Brandon's incorrect techniques had infected the entire system. Defensive positions that left students vulnerable. Combinations that created dangerous openings. Footwork that would get people hurt in real fights. Word spread fast across Nevada. Within 6 weeks, membership doubled. Serious fighters drove from Reno, Carson City, even from California to train under a legitimate UFC champion who actually cared about proper instruction. Tyler Harrison, Brandon's former prize student, was among the first to re-enroll. The 21-year-old college wrestler had learned more incorrect technique under Brandon than he realized. Darius spent 3 months rebuilding Tyler's foundation. Proper chin position, correct hand placement, defensive awareness that came from understanding angles rather than memorizing moves. By September, Tyler won his first amateur tournament. His post-fight interview went viral for different reasons than Brandon's knockout. "Coach D didn't just teach me how to fight," Tyler said, holding his trophy. "He taught me how to be a better man. That matters more than any belt." The gym's culture shifted completely. Students who came looking for aggression found discipline instead. People who wanted to dominate others learned to protect the vulnerable. Darius's philosophy, "real strength means lifting others up," became elite performance's foundation. Ruth Webb attended every major event, her cancer in remission thanks to Darius's UFC-provided insurance. She sat ringside watching her grandson transform lives the same way he'd transformed his own after losing everything. November 2024 brought the moment that would change everything again. 3 of Darius's fighters qualified for the Western Regional UFC Amateur Championship in Sacramento, California. Brianna Cortez in women's flyweight, Marcus Chen in welterweight, Andre Washington in light heavyweight, December 7th, Golden Warren Center. 4,200 fans packed the arena. Brianna fought first, 22 years old, working 2 jobs to support her younger siblings after their parents died in a car accident. Darius had waived her gym fees completely, seeing the same hunger he once carried. She dominated her opponent through 2 rounds. Third round, she locked in a triangle choke that had the crowd on their feet. Her opponent tapped. The referee raised Brianna's hand as tears streamed down her face. Marcus Chen won by knockout in the second round. Andre Washington by unanimous decision. All 3 divisions, all 3 victories. Nevada had never seen a single gym sweep an entire regional championship. The crowd chanted, "Coach D, Coach D," as Darius stood cage-side, watching his students achieve what months earlier seemed impossible. Malcolm Graves approached with an expression Darius couldn't quite read. "The UFC's Southwest Regional VP position just opened up," Malcolm said quietly. "Full executive role, overseeing gym partnerships, fighter development, community outreach across Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and Southern California." Darius stared at him. "Malcolm, I'm not qualified for—" "They want you specifically. Dana White himself requested the meeting. You'd be the first black man to hold a senior VP position in UFC history." The weight of that statement hung between them. "This isn't just about you anymore," Malcolm continued. "It's about every kid like Javon and Terrence who needs to see someone who looks like them in leadership. Every fighter who got a second chance. Every person who survived injustice and came back stronger." Darius looked at his 3 champions celebrating in the ring, at Ruth in the front row crying with joy, at the students who traveled from Las Vegas to support their teammates. "When do they want to meet?" Darius asked. 3 months later, everything changed again. But this time, Darius Webb wasn't cleaning floors. He was making history. Brandon Castellanos sat in High Desert State Prison, serving year 2 of his 10-year sentence. His cell contained no luxury cars, no champagne bottles, no Instagram followers worshiping manufactured success. Just a man with a decade to reflect on how arrogance, racism, and unchecked ego destroyed everything he thought mattered. Former inmates said Brandon stayed isolated, avoiding other prisoners who recognized him as that influencer who got knocked out by a janitor. His mugshot was still a meme representing consequences. No visitors came, no letters arrived, the world had moved on, and Brandon had become exactly what he'd feared most, irrelevant. Meanwhile, at the UFC headquarters, Las Vegas, Darius Webb sat behind a desk with a nameplate reading, "Senior Vice President, Southwest Regional Operations." His phone buzzed. Text from Javon. "Coach, we just enrolled our 500th student in Detroit. Kids who need exactly what you gave us 16 years ago." Second Chance Champions had grown beyond anything Darius imagined. Free MMA training for at-risk youth across Nevada, Arizona, and now Michigan. Javon ran the Detroit operation. Terrence managed Las Vegas. Both men transformed from almost criminals to youth advocates whose stories inspired the kids they served. If Coach D can survive false allegations, lose everything, work as a janitor, and become a UFC executive, Terrence told students at every orientation, then your past doesn't determine your future. 1 year after taking the VP position, Darius returned to elite performance for an exhibition demonstration. He stood in the center of the same mat where Brandon had tried to humiliate him, where 1.3 seconds had changed 2 lives forever. People ask me if I'm angry about those 8 months, Darius said to the assembled crowd, about the harassment, the racism, the attempt on my life. The truth is, that experience taught me something crucial. He paused, looking at faces young and old, every ethnicity, every background, all united by respect for what he represented. We don't get to choose what happens to us. We only get to choose how we respond. Brandon chose revenge. I chose resilience. He's in prison. I'm standing here with all of you. That's not luck. That's the consequence of choosing dignity over destruction. The crowd erupted in applause. Ruth wiped tears from her eyes. Javon and Terrence stood at the back, remembering the coach who'd saved them twice, once as children, once as adults. Darius raised his hand for silence. Your past doesn't define you. Your setbacks don't defeat you. And the people who try to destroy you, they're just revealing who they really are while you're busy becoming who you're meant to be. The applause lasted 3 full minutes. Phone cameras captured the speech, which would be shared millions of times across platforms with hashtags about resilience, justice, and second chances. The truth always surfaces. Karma always collects. And sometimes the janitor is really a king who never forgot his crown, even when the world tried to make him forget. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. This message needs to reach people who are being underestimated, discriminated against, or told they'll never amount to anything. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in second chances, if you've ever been counted out, or if you know someone who needs to hear that their current situation isn't their final destination.